Hey guys, welcome back to our live session. I am Dennis, the Certified Credit Union Financial Counselor, or the CCUFC, here to answer any of your questions you might have about credit, debt, budgeting, investments, whatever it is, but really building a financial future and trying to get you onto that debt-free journey. So I have a couple questions that I want to cover that I get on a regular basis when it comes to a lot of people that I do financial counseling with. If you have any questions, definitely drop them in chat. We can look at them as well. So when we start off, when it comes to financial counseling, we start with budgeting. How can I create a realistic and an effective monthly budget? Now, for a majority of people that I do the financial education with, most of them do not have a budget at all. They don't know how to budget. And I would probably say about 90% of people that come in, sit with me, have no idea exactly what they're paying. Now, this, of course, can be super detrimental when it comes to creating a budget. Really breaking it down, and we go with old school Dave Ramsey that talks about every dollar has a purpose. You first need to break it really down into two things when it comes to a budget. Number one, what are your fixed expenses? What are your variable expenses? For a majority of us, the fixed expenses hopefully make up about 50 to 60% of our income. If they're much higher than that, you'll find that a realistic or effective monthly budget really doesn't work, because the variable expenses have such a very small room. It doesn't leave anything for debt repayment, doesn't leave anything for investing, and a lot of people overspend. Now, visually, coming up with a budget, coming up with a spending plan, whatever you want to call it, is an absolute game changer, because you can look at some of those fixed expenses, see where you could possibly cut, refinance, even lowering some of the expenses you have there. The same with the variable expenses. A lot of people, and traditionally when I do financial education or financial counseling, the variable expenses are a lot higher than people think. When we start looking at the amount that people say, let's say for groceries, usually it's about 2, 3, even 4x what they anticipate they spend when we actually start going through credit card statements, bank statements, when you start looking at income, when you start looking at the expenses and breaking them down. It's very easy, and it kind of sticks out like a sore thumb when it comes to where are you overspending, what exactly does it look like, and where can we cut back. So like I said, fixed expenses, and when you start a budget, when you start an effective budget, the fixed expenses are just that. It is expenses that you're going to have. We're talking about your rent payment, your mortgage, your car payment, could also be like your internet bill, could be your internet provider bill. There are a lot of bills that are just the exact same amount every single month. There's no variation, there's no usage, there's no overage. It is a fixed expense. Car insurance, $200, $250 a month. It can be categorized as a fixed expense because you know every single month that is coming up. Like we said with fixed expense, so that includes a lot of different things, but that should be roughly 50 to 60% of your income. Now, if it's north, if it's 65, 70, 75, chances are you're going to be supplementing your income with credit cards. And that's exactly what we see if you don't have a budget, because number one, a budget gives you exactly where you're at. So when I make a budget with an individual, when we sit down and do this together, it is a point in time. So if you go tonight after we do the live stream and you sit down, you get a budget calculator, you figure out exactly where your budget is, that is a point in time. I don't want you to be, so disencouraged or disheartened to see what it actually looks like, because this is the time that you can take accountability with the budget, that you can look and see on paper in black and white exactly where you're overspending. There's a lot of apps that do this, but I really advise people the first time they do it to do it on pen and paper, write it down and see exactly what you have. Because for a lot of people, you can go through, you can close the app. You don't have to log in there every day. You don't even have to look at it every week. But now's the time to take accountability of your finances, to put yourself in a much better really future than you have today. So second big question that I get comes around the emergency fund and the savings. So again, when it comes to the emergency fund, when it comes to the savings, you want to start this out pretty basic. And the way that I do this and the way that we kind of poise it is just like baby step number one, Dave Ramsey, saving $1,000. That is your goal. If you're a person that has $100, $200, $500 in a savings account, is that enough when it comes to an emergency fund? No. But Again, this is a point in time. This is where you can start building the habit. If you're saving, 20, 30, 50, $100 a month towards an emergency fund, this is going to be starting those baby steps, starting those habits of actually starting to save money. Is it going to be enough to really cover a major expense? No. Is it going to cover a lot of little things if you're saving up that first $1,000? Yeah, if you have an issue with your car, chances are if it's a minor repair, you could absolutely fix it. If something unexpected comes up like a medical expense, chances are you could go ahead and cover it. If you have a copay, if you have something again that's kind of unexpected, is it a tried and true emergency fund? Absolutely not. When we start looking at emergency fund, we are looking at 3 to 6 months of info or 3 to 6 months of savings when it is there. And of course, depending, the 3 to 6 months has a lot of variation. And this will make a big difference on what kind of career you're in, the stability in the career, the market that you're in, and also exactly how much you make and how much you're saving, how much you're spending makes a big difference. So how much should you aim for exactly? Again, it's going to be roughly 3 to 6 months. Do you have a single income? Is there a dual income? Do you have children in the equation, which could have a much higher price tag or a much higher emergency fund or expense if something should happen? Definitely some key things to think about when you're building that emergency fund. Like I said, for me personally, I advise $1,000 in a savings account. That is really going to start it, and that is going to be that mini emergency fund. Then we hop over and we do the employer match. This is a point where I feel like a lot of people that don't start the employer match early and continue building up the emergency fund or go straight into debt repayment mode, all of a sudden it gets, 2, 3, 5 years down the road. All of a sudden, of course, you have zero saved for retirement. You're doing nothing. You've missed out at 3 to 5 years of company matching. That's the reason why, even before we get into the debt repayment phase, I do advise doing that company match. And of course, it might slow down that debt repayment a little bit, but you're going to be accumulating wealth and you're getting a 100% return when it comes to that company match. Now, also when it comes to saving money, guys, huge one is credit score and your credit report. So how do we improve our credit score? When you start looking at credit score, and I know there are a lot of places that say we can fix your credit score in 7 days. Majority of the time, that is not true. The only way that they can advertise that, or the only way that that can be true, is if there's something on your credit report that is 100% legitimately is not yours. If there are discrepancies on your credit report, if there are things that are not on your credit report, if you're trying to dispute them, if you're trying to focus on building, new positive credit lines, it kind of splits it into two sides. And this is the way that I look at it and how I kind of educate people that I do financial counseling is, number one, if you have poor credit, if you have damaged credit on one side, okay, we can deal with that. If you have bankruptcies, if you have collections, if you have open collection items, if you have late pays, okay, we know exactly how we can kind of go about that. We can make sure, that we're starting to make on-time payments. We can make sure that we're contacting some of those collection agencies, making the calls, settling for some of those, squaring up the debt, possibly even getting it lowered or even eliminated in some cases. And then the other side of it is you have to be building new credit. Now, this could be different for a lot of different people, but general rule, you get either a secured card. Let's say you do a $500 secured card. With that secured card, you are starting to build your payment history. Now, when we think of payment history, 35% of your credit score is comprised of your payment history. So on one side, we're kind of attacking the collection accounts. We're kind of attacking and eliminating some of that bad debt. We are replacing it with good debt. This is the reason why the payment history. And of course, the next part when it comes to building up or really repairing that credit score is your capacity. What that means is the amount you have available on a credit card in relationship to the amount you have borrowed on that credit card. Now, we want to make sure that when you have a credit card trying to repair and rebuild your credit, you're keeping that balance at zero. We're using the card every single month. We're paying the card off every single month because it really does two things, really twofold. The first one is you're keeping that balance at zero and you are not paying interest on that card. And the second one is you're keeping the capacity on that card at 100%, meaning you don't owe anything at all. We want to make sure that, again, you're not paying extra money for having a balance on a credit card, but also making sure that that credit card stays at that zero balance and your capacity remains at 100%, meaning you have nothing borrowed on there. Two very easy ways to build your credit score, guys, is one, payment history, like we said, but making sure you're not late. For this, I recommend automation. When you look at pretty much anything that is going to affect your credit score, that reports on there. Again, it could be a mortgage. A lot of places report rent, but let's say your auto loan, if you have any credit cards, make sure you're making the minimum at a very, very minimum, because when you're making that minimum payment, at least it is showing that it is current, saving that credit score. Now, in addition, when it comes to credit score, you have to kind of think bigger picture when it comes to credit score, because when it comes to getting a job and doing an application, most places pull credit. When you look to get any loans, anything of that nature, it is all driven by your credit score. The rate that you receive is driven by your credit score. If you want to get auto insurance, and I know they do that in the state of Michigan where I am, if you have poor credit, your auto insurance is going to cost more. So you are adding additional costs onto maybe even a strapped budget as we see it right now, because you have a poor credit score. And unfortunately, that can create a very difficult situation to get out of if you do not have the income to support it. And when it comes to what is the best strategy to pay off debt, this is one that I deal with a lot of times. When you start getting in credit card limits, and let's say you get to about a $4,000 to $5,000 balance that you're carrying month to month at a 22, 23, 25% interest, it can be incredibly, incredibly taxing, not only mentally, but also on your paycheck. When you start getting your paycheck and you're giving away a lot of money from that paycheck every single month, it can be detrimental to trying to build wealth, trying to get completely debt-free. And really, how do we address this? There's two strategies. Now, if you watch some of my videos, the first one that I always talk about is the debt avalanche method. Now, for me, very mathematical, very based on, having a degree, an advanced degree in strategic leadership, having a lot of finance courses. I focus on the debt avalanche. I always have, and I do this with individuals, again, that I do financial counseling with, because I can kind of monitor and track, even if they're not the best mathematically, we can come up with a really good game plan. Every 2 weeks, we're kind of reviewing the game plan when they get paid, knowing exactly where every dollar is going, what we're going to pay off, and how we're going to eliminate that debt. Now, for a majority of individuals, it is the debt snowball. So what the snowball does is you take your lowest balance and you list them all the way to the highest balance. You make the minimum payment on every single card. Every other dollar that you have to save, every other dollar you have for debt repayment goes right on top to that absolute lowest balance that you have on the card, trying to eliminate that. Now, from a psychological perspective, this is way works for a lot of people, because you can see the elimination of debt. If you have a debt, and let's say it is your lowest debt at $500, as you start putting extra money towards it, it's going to be eliminated. It is going to be paid off much faster than a debt, let's say, that has $2,000, $3,000, $5,000. That small balance is going to be paid off, and you can start seeing a little bit of movement. You can start seeing a little bit of kind of that snowball effect, but picking up the psychological effect and seeing the inertia of paying something off, because then you take that payment that is eliminated in that first one, you move it down and you snowball it to the second one, so on and so forth. And that is exactly how it gets its name. But like I said, for me personally, I recommend the debt avalanche. This takes the cards, listing them, or actually any debt that you have, list them from the absolute highest rate, not worrying about the amount, but the highest rate, and then lowering it down from there, meaning every dollar that goes up to that very high rate card is going to have more of an effect. Where if you think about it kind of mathematically, if you put a dollar on a card that has a 22% interest, you're cutting about 22% of that. If you have a card that's 30, 35, 36% interest, dollar for dollar, you're getting more of a return on the card that has a 35% interest versus the card that has a 25% interest. Regardless of what the balance is, you're going to be getting more of a return. And that's what we're looking for by doing the avalanche method. But like I said, a lot of people psychologically want to do the snowball, and we talk about both methods when it comes to financial counseling. And we do really break it down onto what is going to work for the individual, catering it kind of whatever they need. Now, of course, when we think of retirement, it's kind of crazy, but how much should I be saving for retirement? For me, general rule of thumb, where we want to get to. So this is the goal. when it comes to retirement. And when we think of retirement, we are thinking of your 401k plans and your HSA account, or excuse me, your IRA accounts. You could put an HSA in there, but overall, the two big retirement accounts are 401k plans and those IRA accounts. Now, majority of people are contributing about 6%. That is the national average. However, if you're putting 6% in and you start, let's say at age 30 or 35, the 6% is going to have a very long runway to grow and get to that nest egg that you need. Now, retirement accounts, we're seeing them about 175,000, I believe is still about the average when it comes to retirement. And what people are finding is with that balance during their retirement years, they're running out of money. That is because they only put the 3, 4, 5, even 6% into that 401k. Even though they got a 4% match, it doesn't accumulate fast enough depending on the contributions, because of course, this is based on your income. Where, yeah, if you have a job that's making $200,000 a year, that 5% is going to be a pretty decent amount going in there, and you'll actually cap what is going in that 401k at a certain point. But let's say you're at a job making an average salary in the United States right around 67K. If you're putting 3 or 4% in there, chances are you're not even coming remotely close to the $23,000. That is the cap in there, just based on the average savings. So again, the goal for this is 15%. We've said this before, and really, if you start this early, or if you do kind of the step up method that I talk about. So when we think about a 401k, you start with a new employer. Let's say they match 4%. Okay, right off the bat, boom, we're going to put 4% in there. That is going to be the absolute match. When it comes to your retirement funds, you want to put the 4%. You want that 100% match. Now, depending on how long you're with that employer, let's say a year later, they give you a 3% raise. 1%, that is all I'm asking, and that is all I'm hoping. One additional percent is going to go into that 401k. So again, if you're putting away 4%, now you're bumping it to 5%, and we are going to keep that stepped approach all the way until we hit that 15%, which of course is going to be, if you're putting in again, that 4 or 5%, might be over the next 10 years, but this is also going to hold true when you go somewhere else. When you get a promotion, let's say you pick up another job, you go to a different employer. If you're leaving your current employer and you're contributing, let's say 7%, when you go to the newer employer, depending on the match, you want to start off at 7%, which means if you start working, let's say hypothetically at 20, by the time you're 35, you're going to be putting in 15%. By the time you're 35 to 65, you have 30 years of 15% contributions. And we do not, and I do not, and I really have to stress, I do not count the employer contributions as part of that 15%, where if your employer puts in 10%, you put in 10%. Yep, I'm putting in 20%. That's all done. Nope. It is about you putting in 15%. Now, the different ways to do this is one, you can do a traditional 401k, which of course is your pre-tax dollars. You get a benefit this year, but my advisement coming from that financial aspect is the Roth variation. If you can do a Roth 401k, if you are doing a Roth IRA, absolutely the Roth. Now, why do I recommend this? Why do people and so many financial counselors, educators, a lot of people focus and really build on a Roth? Now, me personally, I have both a Roth IRA. I also have a Roth 401k. The reason being, I am willing, and if I do pay a little bit more taxes today versus wondering exactly what my tax bracket is going to be 20 years down the road, I don't want to take that chances. I don't want that big question mark on where exactly my savings account is going to be, or that retirement account is going to be 20 years down the road when I'm 65 years of age and not knowing what tax bracket I'm going to be in. I would rather know exactly what is in my account. And also, when it comes to retirement, there might be a point where you don't need to take funds out of there. So let's say now we fast forward, you're at 73, you are required for those traditional accounts to take required minimum distributions. If you need the money, you got to take out the RMDs. If you don't need the money, guess what? You have to take out the RMDs. So they are going to take money out of your retirement plan. They are going to tax you on the money that is withdrawn, even if you do not need the money. Now, I do not like that. Again, not knowing the future, not knowing 20 years down the road. And do I think in the next 20 years, we're probably going to see a little bit of a higher tax? My thought is absolutely. I can't see a future where we spend the next 20 years and all of a sudden taxes are eliminated, or they're much, much lower than they are right now. And then, of course, the Roth might not have been worth it. I would rather know right off the bat exactly what I have in those investment accounts, like I said, and making that Roth variation. The way that I kind of see it, or the way that I kind of pose it, is you're kicking your tax liability down the road. I know even now I'm in a little bit of a higher tax bracket. My wife and myself are both working full time, a little bit of a higher tax bracket, but chances are by the time that retirement account, if we stayed with traditional, gets to a few $1,000,000, then we get taxed on not only the contributions we put in there, but we also get taxed on the growth, meaning that it could actually put us in a much higher tax bracket. That is those required minimum distributions in there at a much higher tax bracket during the retirement years, even if we don't need the funds. I do not like that, and I do not like how that sounds at all. Now, of course, we touched on a couple different things, including the retirement account, paying off debt, and also that emergency fund. So before we get into the next one, guys, definitely subscribe to the channel and let me know in the comments, because we're going to be doing this every single week. So if you have questions, definitely drop them in chat. But this is another one. When it comes to accounts, when it comes to that emergency fund, where do you save all of your money? So general rule, what we have for this is when you think about what you spend, are you keeping it at a checking account or in a checking account that a majority of them have zero interest, meaning you are earning nothing? Are we looking for a high yield savings account? Are we looking for short-term CDs? Where exactly do we keep the funds that we have within the accounts? Now, this is kind of a combination. Emergency fund, absolutely. You want to keep, number one, liquid. Number two, you need it in a high yield savings account. Now, I do have some links down below, and there is one down there for M1 Finance. You can also do Robinhood. Both of them offer high yield savings accounts, which are roughly about 4.5% right now to grow your money. When you start thinking about parking money in a savings account or parking money in a financial institution, you need to be outpacing inflation. Right now, inflation is around 2.8%, meaning you have to make more than 2.8% to actually keep your money from losing money. The time value of money is incredible. If you ever did a quick Google search, you can check it out and see that a dollar, 30 years ago is not worth the same that a dollar is today, because the diminishing really buying power that it has, which is kind of crazy. So in the checking account, we're keeping roughly 1 to 2 months of your expenses, making sure you have all of those covered, all the bills are paid, and then putting everything else in that high yield savings account to at least generate a little bit of income. Is it going to be groundbreaking? Depends on if you're sitting on 3 to 6 months of that high yield savings account with that emergency fund that is parked in there. But again, we don't want to put it into short-term CDs. And the reason for this is if the money comes out, if there is a true emergency, chances are you're going to have to pay the penalties when it comes to those short-term CDs. Might be 3 or 6 months of interest, but overall, I don't want to pay penalties. I don't want to pay fees when it comes to financial institutions. Now, when we start thinking about bigger picture and when we start thinking about life events, this is one where a lot of people talk about investing. We talk about retirement. We talk about IRAs, 401k plans. Those run about 5 years plus. So when we start thinking about larger life events, you're saving money for a down payment of a home, you're having kids, you're getting ready for a wedding. This is the point where we are going to set aside, what does it look like? So let's say you want to buy a home in 3 years. You want to save, $30,000 in the next 3 years. So, okay, let's do the math and really backwards the math. So we need $10,000 a year over the next 3 years. What does it break it down on a monthly basis? What does it break it down on a paycheck to paycheck basis? And where can we stock and where can we put away this money? Now, of course, when you're looking for a big life event, when you're looking for really saving for a home or an expense, if it's a really extravagant vacation, anything of that nature, we're going to put money aside on a weekly, bi-weekly basis whenever you get paid to afford that expense in the future. It is something you have to do. Again, this is not money that we're putting into an investment account. This could be money that we're putting into some of those shorter term CDs, definitely keeping it in the high yield savings account, because we know this money is completely earmarked for that down payment of a home, which we anticipate to have within 3 years. And even if it comes a little bit quicker, When you have a runway like this, when you have a couple year runway, you can make sure that one, you're saving for a down payment. We can make sure everything is cleaned up on your credit score, that you're going to have the best possible rate, and also paying attention to the rates. Mortgage rates fluctuate on a day-to-day basis. So even maybe we get the 3 year down the road, we have the credit scores, they're looking good, the down payment is saved. All of a sudden, interest rates like we've seen for mortgages are around 8%. Does it make sense to buy at that point? That's something definitely evaluating when it comes to these big life events. There was a point in time where people actually saved money to pay for things. If you think it's kind of crazy, where right now we live in a society that is instant gratification, they would rather buy something, spend the next 5 years paying for it with all of the interest, with everything else that comes with it, versus saving for another 2 to 3 years and then buying what they're looking for. It's kind of crazy. And when I see people that come in that borrow money, let's say for a wedding, borrow $15,000, $25,000 for a wedding, start the marriage life off together with 5 years of debt. They start getting into a home. All of a sudden, they can't afford a home because guess what? They still have the big outstanding debt from the wedding that is still sitting out there. And then you couple it with student loans, you couple it with lower income. There are so many things when it comes to big life events and making sure that you are prepared. It is about managing, and going back to the first one, managing the budget and making sure you know exactly what you're spending, where your money is going. And if you're really living under your means, let's say 85% of your income, it is incredible how much power you will possess if you live on 85% of your income versus 100% of your income. And if you're able to do that, and if you're able to budget properly without that 15% that's going into savings accounts or the 401ks, it is a game changer for the rest of your life. And not having to borrow money makes everything infinitely cheaper because you don't have to pay the interest rates. Now, when it comes to investing, we talk about this again. This is a question that I get from a lot of, surprisingly, younger generation. When I see people that are 16, 17, 18, even starting a job, I had an individual that just started at Amazon, has their first real job, had another one that just graduated out of school, was going to be a CPA. What is the best low risk investment options? For me, if you checked out the portfolio, S&P 500, NASDAQ 100, I do index investing. It works incredibly well. It is very low risk, in my opinion. Some people might say, hey, it's a little bit more aggressive than I like. But when it comes to investing and when it comes to that 5+ year time frame, absolutely, if you can put money away in the S&P 500 and looking at the returns over the last 10, 20, 30 years, the snowball takes effect. Very similar to what we were talking about with the debt avalanche and the debt snowball. It does the exact same thing when you start adding in compounding interest with the investment through dollar cost averaging. Now, of course, me, if you've watched the videos, I dollar cost average every Monday morning. We put X amount of dollars into that S&P 500 and the NASDAQ 100, and I just do it on a regular basis. This keeps me really on track. I know what the end goal is, but when we start investing through dollar cost averaging, when we do this on a regular basis, it's very easy. I don't have to log into my investment accounts. I don't have to track their performance. I don't even have to look at them for weeks or months because my investing is automated. It happens every single week on a Monday morning. As long as the money's in the account, it's moved right into the investments that I already have chosen at M1 Finance, and it makes it super easy. I advise, if you're starting off, and if you're starting off even with $100, get an account at M1 Finance, get it at Robinhood, Charles Schwab, JP Morgan. There's a ton of different places that you can start off and building a low risk investment portfolio with the S&P 500. Figure out how it works. Do your research. I always say this before you invest into anything. Make sure you take some time. You do your research. You understand the platform that you're going to open that brokerage account. What does it look like? How long does it take to get money there? Is it instantaneous? What are their limits? There are a lot of things you need to know when you have investing platforms, and knowing exactly what you can do and what you can't, making sure you know, again, what you're investing in. Put $100 in there, play around with it, track the market, see how well you do. And we even did this in one of my high school classes. You can actually take a hypothetical $10,000 investment, put it and invest it into whatever you want, It'll run a bunch of scenarios. It'll run a bunch of information online and see exactly how well it performed before you put real money in there. I got to say this again, guys. Make sure you do your investment. If you're following someone on Instagram, if you're looking at TikTok, even here on YouTube, make sure you do your own research. Even if they're a financial advisor, make sure you do your own research, guys. You have to fact check. I've been in the financial industry for almost 20 years. I've seen some financial advisors that do incredibly well, and I see some that are a little bit more on the questionable side, and some of them actually that were released from the company because it was a little bit questionable on the way they were doing some of the investments. So again, I stress, do your own research. I am not a financial advisor. I am a financial counselor. I do not hold the Series 7 license for the investing, but again, make sure that you do your own research. Now, number 9, this is one that we have actually had a ton of success where I am. Now, I am just north of Detroit. Is there local or federal finance assistance or grant programs that people qualify for? This is huge. When you start looking at city programs, there's a lot of city programs. If it's low income, if it's debt consolidation, we have even seen a lot of housing improvement projects or financial assistance that we've seen. A lot of these were grants, and it's really dependent on where you're at and what kind of demographic you live in. Because again, here north of Detroit, we've seen a lot that are offered through the city of Detroit. We've seen a lot that are offered through Wayne County and Macomb County, again, where I live. We've seen a lot of programs that are even on a county level or on a city level or even on a state level and also on a federal level. We have seen this, depending on your income, again, your status. There are a lot of different variations or a lot of different requirements, but we've got people free money to replace roofs, to do home improvements for energy efficiency. And all of it came through either local or federal funding, which was huge. It's people, that are in a low income housing that have the ability to replace windows and fix the roof. That's incredible. We've had a lot of programs that will offer federal assistance for debt repayment. Again, looking at some of the low income where we're at, definitely it was a game changer and a life changer for a lot of people that were eligible for these programs, and even making sure that they have the resources. I mean, we volunteer a lot with food banks. They do incredibly well getting everything out to food pantries. Relying on the community and building out everything you need really strengthens the community, and giving back feels incredible. And the final one I'm going to leave you with, guys, unless you got some more questions, is what financial mistakes should I avoid based on current situations? So it's kind of crazy. So what I see and where I see the biggest pitfall today is, number 1, credit cards. Living outside of your means, keeping up with the Joneses, lifestyle creep, tempted to upgrade the house, tempted to upgrade the car, moving to a nicer appointment or apartment. Looking at your long-term financial goals, guys, you have to keep it in mind, where if you get a promotion, all of a sudden you get a new car. Doesn't mean that $20,000 car can take you from A to B. Does it have to be a $50,000 car, a $70,000 car, a $100,000 car? What exactly do your long-term financial goals look like? And really, the lifestyle creep and the credit cards are just absolutely crushing. When I see people that come in with $30,000, $50,000, $100,000 in credit card debt, it is just incredible to see how much income is being eaten up on a monthly basis just based on the interest that you're paying. If you have a card that's at $25,000 and you're paying hundreds of dollars of interest, think about this for a minute. Instead of putting hundreds of dollars of interest for stuff on a credit card that you've already bought months, years, possibly even decades ago, you could be taking that $350, let's say hypothetically, putting $350 into an investment account every single month if you did not have that credit card debt, and your life would be infinitely better because you are not giving away your time for money. When you think of income, you work X amount of dollars or X amount of hours to make that $350 just to give it away to a financial institution. So let's see, guys, we got a question right here. Portfolio of VTI, SEHD, and a split between FTEC and QQQM. That's a solid one. You're going to have some definitely overlap. I'm not familiar with FTEC. VTI, I do hold. SEHD, I do hold. And then, of course, QQQM, Josh, I do hold as well. FTEC, let me look that one up really quick and take a look at it, because that one I'm not super familiar with. That is information technology. So very similar. I wonder, and one thing that I would definitely look at is what is the overlap between the FTEC and the QQQ? Knowing they're both tech, I know one is the NASDAQ 100, but looking at how much of an overlap is there. Now, one thing that I did is I did lower quite a bit, and I'll go ahead and pop your question on there. I did lower my stake in the SCHD. So when we started out about 5 years ago, with the SCHD, I had about 35% of my portfolio in the SCHD. We scaled that back a little bit to about 20. And if you caught the portfolio update that I did a couple days ago, we actually scaled that back a little bit further to 15. Now, traditionally, when we look at the SCHD, it might make a little bit of a difference how close you are to retirement and what exactly that timeline looks like. Because my thought, and let me know if you share this opinion, is when we look at the Vanguard Total Index, when you look at the FTEC, when you look at the QQQM, if you have a 10, 20, 30-year runway, the chances are you're going to see way more growth out of those over the next 10 years, knowing where tech is, knowing where all of these information technology companies are, where the valuation of them sit, where NVIDIA is going, Microsoft, Apple, Broadcom, a lot of these, where they're going to be within the next 10 to 20 years. I feel like you could grow your portfolio to a monster size. And even if you wanted to, at that point, getting closer to retirement to supplement income, putting a little bit of that money into the SCHD, again, just to generate income, and even maybe getting to the point with SCHD where the portfolio gets large enough, you can put a percentage or put a dollar amount into the SCHD, utilizing that to supplement your income. So if you get Social Security and you get that dividend interest from the SCHD, you could actually supplement your income depending on the size of the portfolio. And that's my plan. What you're investing in right now, I invest in. And again, if you even look at a little bit more of a focus, which looking right here in that ETF, specifically the FTEC, very, very heavy when it comes to 284 holdings that we have right here. But when you look at NVIDIA, Microsoft, and Apple, I mean, you're talking 10, 20, 30, 40, almost 50% of the portfolio is within those three companies. Even if you went in, looking at the QQQM, you might not have as much heavy tech, as much kind of in a heavy tech, because it shows here the top 10 holdings are 60% of this ETF. Again, if you're holding it in a smaller amount, I would definitely recommend. And again, if you're holding, let's say 10 or 15%, because you're going to see some really big ups with this, but you can also see some really big downs. So if we see the impact of NVIDIA, if we see the impact with tariffs, which we know should be some news, should be the 90-day expiration of some of the tariffs tomorrow. And again, when you're starting to dollar cost average, you're going to catch the ups, you're going to catch the downs. I do like it. It's a little bit riskier, but like I said, if you're younger, if you're looking at a certain portion, now this is, of course, I wouldn't put 50% into something that is very high tech, very high risk. But overall, looking at what you're holding, and I don't know the percentages that you're holding in there either. Yeah, definitely, because VTI is going to overlap with the FTEC, which is going to overlap with the QQQM. It's a good one. And again, I would add it into a portfolio, maybe not at a very, very large percent. Because for me personally, I have the QQQM, which is 45% of my portfolio. That is my biggest holding. And I know that is tied to the NASDAQ 100, followed by the VOO, which is the S&P 500, which again, you're kind of focused out a little bit back with that VTI. VOO, of course, is the 500 largest companies in the United States. VTI covers every company within the United States market. So again, you can definitely, because when you look at the comparison, about the large caps are roughly 80% of the market. So you have a little exposure to mid cap, you have a little exposure to small cap. Definitely like it. But like I said, out of that portfolio, definitely great. I just wouldn't hold too much of that portfolio in that SCHD, just because we haven't seen the return. I've really, really been a proponent of it for an incredible amount of time. But when we start looking at comparison to like an SCHD and then starting to look back with the reconstitution that they did in March, not the best. They put a lot into healthcare, and in my opinion, guys, it has really, really weakened the performance and how well the SEHD has done over an extended amount of time, just because of the reconstitution. Now, that also doesn't mean that it might change, really next year when they do the reconstitution again. And I believe it is every March they do the reconstitution. So you might see a little bit of a change there. You might see some of the portfolio shift. But again, I feel like they might need to recalibrate some of their stuff, because even looking at the 10 years, it is about 11%, meaning if you had it in the SCHD, the VTI, the FTEC, the QQQM would have absolutely outperformed pretty much over the last decade when it comes to the returns you would have seen out of the SCHD. Again, that's why I'm holding it a little bit smaller in the portfolio, because we haven't seen the returns over an extended amount of time, and they don't grow as fast as, of course, those growth funds do. But we also don't see the big pullback in there. So I hope that answered it, guys. But very cool to see. I love doing the financial education. I love doing, all of the investing questions and everything else, guys. So if you have questions, we're going to be doing this again, probably once or twice every single week is what I really want to focus on and getting this done. Thank you for the information. I have 20, 30 plus years of working. Yeah, definitely take it in consideration. Like I said, if you have 20 or 30 years of working, putting a little bit more, a little bit riskier for sure, because that's a pretty good runway. You have pretty much the same runway. I have 20 years till retirement. If I get to retirement age at 65 and I don't end up retiring early. But yeah, if you're looking 20, 30 years, you need the growth. You need, the QQQ, you need the FTEC. You really need that 20 years of contributions and the 20 years of growth in that portfolio. SEHD, as much as I like the dividend income, I feel like, like I said, you can switch it over to the SEHD when you get many years down the road. When you have a much larger portfolio, you can switch some of it over to supplement Social Security with the dividends you get from the SEHD. But the portfolio has to grow to that point. That is the thing where if you're keeping a large majority into that SEHD, you're not going to see it grow to the point that you need it to, because it might lag, 5, 10, 15%, which is going to be huge over a 20-year runway. So, all right, guys, like I was saying, that is going to do it for today's live stream. Thank you guys for joining me. We're going to be doing this at least once or twice a week. I think it's super beneficial. Once we get a lot more subscribers, get a lot more comments in here, we can go through some of the situations that we have, and I see them on a regular basis. I do financial counseling professionally. That's what I do actually with my credit union, as well as being a branch manager there. So we are always busy, always doing things, always seeing people, and always doing this education piece, which is the exact reason why I started the finance channel. Definitely wanted to get the info out of there, and knowing everything that is going on and the craziness that I see with debt, with credit cards, with budgeting, with credit scores, with everything that I see on a daily basis, it is kind of incredible. So guys, again, thank you guys for joining me for the stream. If you definitely like the content, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and I'll catch you in the next stream.